an eternal universe is still dependent. It doesn't matter just because it's eternal or never ending.
Han Meditations.
Hello guys, I am Han, this is Kelly.
Hi everyone.
We are Han Meditations and we're back with another interesting video. So why don't you find somewhere comfortable to sit and watch, grab yourself some nice hot tea, hot cocoa, or water, and let's get right into it together.
The argument from dependency can be used to make an irrefutable case for God's existence. It goes like this. Everything we observe in the known universe is dependent. When we say that something is dependent, we mean that its existence and the properties it has requires an explanation outside of itself. To argue otherwise is to imply that these things gave rise to themselves. This is like saying that something both exists and does not exist at the same time, which is obviously an absurd proposition. A good example to help demonstrate this principle is a triangle. The triangle's property of the number of angles cannot vary. It can never be anything other than 3, because triangle means having 3 angles. So by its very definition, a triangle is a thing that has 3 angles. This property of having 3 angles is explained by the very existence of there being a triangle. By contrast, the triangle's property of colour can vary. Similarly, the lengths of its sides can also vary, as they can be longer or shorter. The size and colour of the triangle are properties that are not explained by the mere existence of the triangle. Hence, triangles in the physical world are dependent things, because we must look to an explanation that is external to the triangle in order to explain its existence. If we apply these same principles to the universe, then we come to the conclusion that it is dependent, because it too has properties that could be different to how they currently are. For example, the number of stars and planets it contains. This raises the question, how did the universe come to be? What explains it? The explanation for the universe cannot be anything that is dependent. Otherwise, we end up in a situation where the explanation requires an explanation, which does not explain anything. Besides, trying to use something that requires an explanation to explain something that requires an explanation will never give us any answers, as it leads to an infinite regress of explanations, which is absurd. Think of a line of dominoes that goes on forever. You will never arrive at a point where they stop falling. We conclude that whatever explains the universe must itself be independent. Now, not only does it have to be independent, it also has to be eternal. In fact, independent things are by their definition eternal. If they're not eternal, then it means they have a beginning, and things with a beginning need an explanation. That is to say, they are dependent upon something external to explain why they came into being. So how does the Qur'an relate to all of this? The 112th chapter of the Qur'an defines this independent, eternal existence as Allah.
قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ.
Say, He is Allah, the One.
اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ.
Allah is He on whom all depend.
لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ.
He begets not, nor was He begotten.
وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ.
And there is none comparable to Him. Allahus Samad, which means that Allah is He on whom all depend, highlights Allah's independence. And Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad, which means He begets not, nor was He begotten, implies eternality. We can see that in less than 10 words, the Qur'an describes our Creator in a way that provides an irrefutable argument for His existence. Allah is the independent, eternal reality that explains the origin of life, the universe, and everything. Atheists might respond by claiming that the universe is eternal and therefore it does not require an explanation. This does not help them because an eternal universe still has certain properties that could be different to how they are. Therefore, there must be something external to the universe that explains its physical properties. Hence, even an eternal universe is dependent. To help illustrate this, let's take the example of an eternal red triangle. The fact that the triangle has existed forever does not stop it from requiring an explanation for why it's red and not another colour. It does not matter whether the thing we are discussing is a triangle or universe. Nothing magically becomes independent just because it is eternal. Another response that atheists might put forward is that science will eventually come up with an explanation that does not require God. This is actually not the case, as the argument from dependency is a metaphysical argument. Metaphysical arguments are based on first principles, which transcends all science. If you deny first principles, then it has logical implications that lead to a worldview based on absurdity. You can bring any scientific theory now or in the future, and this metaphysical argument will still be valid. Science can only refer to things that are dependent because it relies on observations. If you can observe something, then you are dealing with a dependent thing because it need not have existed, or could have existed in a different way, i.e., with potentially different properties. One final challenge posed by atheists is to ask, why can't the eternal independent cause behind the universe be some blind unconscious process? Why should anyone believe that it has a will at all? In response, simply put, since the universe could have been otherwise, then it stands to reason that a decision maker is required to determine its existence from non-existence and decide which properties it has out of other possible properties. The ability to choose is the characteristic of a being that has a will and is fully conscious. This independent, eternal being that chose to create is whom we Muslims call Allah. To learn more about the miracles of the Qur'an, please download your free copy of the book, The Eternal Challenge, at the link below.
Whoa. That we might have to get a copy of that book and do a book review, because that's the kind of interesting kind of content that I like, because and we love this kind of content because it is just so interesting to think about it. And I would think about all the time, hey, what is anything? What is this? What is that? And the way that he explained it so purposely is that on dependency really is something to behold, because, you know, how he explained the triangle is dependent. It's of a dependent nature. It is dependent on having three angles. It's in the name triangle. Anything with three angles is dependent. The universe in itself is dependent because it's dependent on certain things. And, you know, science can only observe things that are dependent on other things. That's what science is. And whenever you start talking about the metaphysical world, the explanations become, you know, something that transcends science itself. So whenever you start talking about things like, hey, who was God? What is God? And, you know, what is anything? It becomes of a metaphysical nature. Whenever you start saying things like how it said in the Quran, it said that Allah says, about when it's speaking about Allah, it says he begets not, nor was he begotten, which essentially means he's eternal, because if you're saying he begets not, you're basically saying that he wasn't created. There was no, you know, reproduction. There was no, you know, creation of God. So even whenever you start talking about things, like I even said, if you say something has a beginning, it needs to explain how it began. But if something always was, then you don't need to explain how it always was. It always was. So a lot of people, they can't comprehend this kind of stuff. But this is the stuff that I like. So for me, it's easy to say, oh, okay, something always was. Boom, it's done. He begets not. He wasn't begotten. Okay. He's eternal. He was always here. All time is now. Either you exist or you don't. It's that simple. If all time is now, either you exist or you don't exist. And since something exists, that's how it always was. Either something had to exist or it couldn't. And non-existence couldn't necessarily happen, because even if something doesn't exist, that's nothing, and nothing still is something to a degree. So when you start talking at this metaphysical nature, it starts to get really interesting really quickly.
Yeah, this is really deep. This is really deep. It's getting into deep metaphysics, philosophy, logical fallacies. This is just a whole lot right here. This is very interesting for me. I have to like really contemplate on this for a while to really fully comprehend my head around it. But, you know, Han, he's just so advanced. He's genius level. It's just, you know, it's instant for him.
Let's not go that far, but, you know, I appreciate it, you know.
But no, for me, I really liked the line right before the one you were breaking down where it says, Allah is he on whom all depend. And the way they broke it down means that it means he is independent and eternal. And an eternal universe is still dependent. When it said that, I was like, oh, yeah, like an eternal universe is still dependent. It doesn't matter just because it's eternal or never ending or whatever. But I like that line, Allah is he on whom all depend, because boom, like that right there in one line really tells you that God really is only one that should be worshipped, right? Like if people are worshiping deities and these things, it's like, okay, but even these deities themselves still depend on God to even exist, right? So it's just like, what's really the point of putting worship into these beings when you could just go straight to the source that created them as well, God, which is clearly even more powerful. So, I mean, if God wanted to, the deity could be gone like that, right? But you can't make God go like that. Ain't nothing can make God go.
You're absolutely right.
So this was interesting. And that was like a brain game for me. I don't know about you guys, but it was interesting. But it's like, ooh, I feel like that meme where they're like all those codes and stuff on the little wall. Like all the little,
like the Matrix.
Yeah, like the Matrix.
Interesting. Wow. That was interesting, and I want to find more like that, because that was one of the most interesting we've seen. So, keep watching, guys. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing. You can always unsubscribe later. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. Thank you for sharing the video. Thank you to everybody that donates to the channel. We need it more than you realize. Even 1 penny, it all counts. We see every single one, and we love you guys so much, and we'll see you in the next video.